What is going on, Washington fans? I am fired up here on Taking Command with Josh Taylor on the JTFB YouTube channel, mostly because I just got done watching that Eric Bieniemy press conference that finally happened this morning. It's Thursday. Don't know when you're watching this video, but if you haven't seen it, it's a terrible streaming job by the media team, but still, regardless, go check it out on Washington's YouTube channel. They have the replay there. Absolutely fired up for that guy. But the end of February is almost here already. I know the offseason is rolling along, and so am I. Obviously, the biggest thing coming up next besides the combine, which I'll talk about as well, which somehow I got approved for. Don't know if I can make it or not. But the biggest thing coming up is the start of free agency, which is March 15th. I think technically the legal tampering period starts on the 13th. But another big date that already just happened this week was that the window for the franchise tag opened up. So, of course, I'm going to talk about Daron Payne. But, guys, I'm excited to take a look and give you a little preview at some of our free agents as we head to free agency, which is happening in just right around 3 weeks or so. Not sure when you're watching this, but it's coming up close regardless. So, obviously, I'm going to start out with the elephant in the room. The biggest one, all eyes are on Washington as they hold. A lot of people have been saying a top 5. Someone even said the number 3 overall free agent this offseason. That's Daron Payne. After having his career best season by a mile, it wasn't even close. We've seen really good production coming from the run stopping, and he's gotten pressures and hurries on the quarterback, and he's definitely made his presence known next to Jonathan Allen. But it seemed like Jonathan Allen, of course, those edge guys were the ones getting to the quarterback. So this season was absolutely monumental. Do you tag or do you pay Daron Payne? And it sounds like, according to Ben Standig from The Athletic, that they are leaning towards franchise tagging him. I've seen Adam Schefter and a bunch of other people saying it's a huge possibility. And I'm going to talk about why I understand it. Yes, I want a long-term deal done. This is a very young guy. He's only 25. Give him that second contract. Keep him here for 4 or 5, heck, even 6 years. Get that production. Keep him and Jonathan Allen together there in the middle of the line and keep causing havoc. But the 2022 stats is what really jumps out to me. It's where he can go into this and saying, hey, this is what I did last season. I deserve this contract. Let's get it done. But, of course, you have to look at the seasons before that where the production really wasn't there. But then this year, he just blows it out of the water. 2022, 32 solo tackles, 65 total, 11.5 sacks, 18 tackles for loss, 1 fumble recovery, 11.5 sacks. I think that tied butts with the most all-time in a single season. So you're looking at maybe one of the best, if not the best, single performances by an interior D tackle for Washington ever. So I think there is leverage on Daron Payne's side of it, but for Washington, it's more of a business thing as, hey, we saw what you did last year, but what about the years before that? Maybe you are just now like hitting your stride. You got some different pass rushing moves. You're really, hitting your prime. And if you can do something like this again next year, not saying it's got to be 11.5 sacks or even 11, 10, anything like that. Heck, 7, 8. But just make your presence known like you did this past season. I can't tell you how many times I'm watching a game and I'm like, oh my gosh, Daron Payne is in the backfield again. You can just see such an improvement getting into the backfield this season. So let's take a look at the numbers. The franchise tag will cost $18.93 million for a D tackle getting tagged. It's not just Daron Payne, that's any of them. And I want to say, from what I've seen, like the kind of deal he's looking for is somewhere in the 21 to 22 mil a year range. So from a business standpoint of Washington, if you do tag him, you're saving money this year. If you tag him again next year, I think, probably go up to like 2021. So you're saving money next year too if you were to double tag him, which I hope they don't do. And this isn't saying if you tag him that a long-term deal won't get done. We've tagged many people, and it turned out that we did pay them. And I think that's more realistic of what Washington wants to do. Tag them, say, all right, let's see one more season of what you got, next to Jonathan Allen. Let's see what we got going with this duo here. Can you do it again, or will you go back to those early days, Daron Payne, where you're doing great in the run stopping, but the numbers of getting to the pass rush just didn't meet what you want contract-wise. So I have no problem with it. Yes, I want him here long-term. I would love to sign him. If they do, I'm still excited about it. But from a business standpoint, they want a franchise tag, Daron Payne, and honestly, I get it. one more season, let him play on that tag one time, and then get the deal done. Keep him here, 4 or 5 year deal after that, where he's, almost 31, maybe at the oldest 32 at the end of his contract. Absolutely no problem with that. Now, another name that's been hot this offseason that people are kind of on the fence about, don't really know what to expect, and that's a fan favorite. That's Taylor Heinicke. And there's a lot to break down with this. Now, obviously, the thing with Taylor Heinicke that people said last year was he knows the offense. He's the go-to guy. He comes in, he just gets the job done. Is it always pretty? No. Is he a franchise guy? No. Is he a quarterback one that can, start and win you the playoff games and get you far? No. Did we go on a win streak with him last year? Yeah. Somehow he just finds a way to win. But at the end of the day, you need an upgrade, and Washington understands that. And I think Sam Howell will be an upgrade. I think he is QB1. I truly believe it, especially after all this Eric Bieniemy talk, Ron Rivera, Marty Hurney, and then just things that I've heard, at the Senior Bowl and, just talking to people. Sam Howell, legit is the QB1. I think there is a shot that if Lamar Jackson, by some miracle, is available, that Washington would trade, on the non-exclusive tag to first and pay Lamar Jackson. But I don't think that's going to happen. If anyone does it, it probably would be Atlanta, but Baltimore is going to get it done. But nonetheless, what happens with Taylor Heinicke? He doesn't know this offense this year because it's a brand new offense with Eric Bieniemy. So he's going to have to learn some things too. But at the end of the day, he loves being here. He said it at the Super Bowl on Radio Row, talking, busting on the boys. He said so many times, he genuinely wants to be here and he has no problem being the backup quarterback. He's like, dude, that's the easiest job in the NFL. You just got to be ready in case something happens. Then you go in. And it seems like for Taylor Heinicke, something always does happen to where he does have to go in. Now I want to talk about this big number here in the middle, $19.8 million. Average annual salary per Spot Track. Now, I love Spot Track, and for me, it's the most accurate. People say they hate it because of things like this. But what's really throwing this off, and I put down here way off due to the lack of comps for Heinicke, it's because the algorithm they use, the formula that Spot Track uses to get these numbers, is based off of the rest of the contracts that are going to be going out. So you have Ryan Tannehill at $29.5 million. I don't know if the Titans actually pay that. I don't know if they should or if anyone should. And then you have Jimmy G at $7 million. Then you have Andy Dalton at $3 million. And I want to say Bridgewater is in there around that $3-4 million a year range as well. So it just throws it way off. There's such an extreme between a guy like Tannehill. Then you have, Taylor Heinicke, who in my opinion would be an upgrade over Dalton. And a lot of people could argue it'd be an upgrade over Jimmy G. Some might not agree with that. I don't. I think Jimmy G would still be a better one-year option over Taylor Heinicke if you did need a starting quarterback. And I think a lot of teams would agree with that. So what I did is I really looked at some of these other guys like Jacoby Brissett, who is set to be that 5.4, maybe $5.5 million per year range kind of guy in this offseason, who, by the way, I would love to bring him in as a backup if we do lose Taylor Heinicke. But for me, I'm looking at Taylor Heinicke at a $5 million per year deal, whether it's 1 year for 5 or it's 2 for 10. Regardless, I think that's a very reasonable contract for Taylor Heinicke. No one's paying him $20 million. No one's paying him even close to that. I don't see any team being willing to pay him $10 million. I don't know what his market is like. I don't think there is a legit market out there to where someone wants to bring him in as QB1. So why would he go to another team, that he doesn't know? This fan base loves him. They eat it up. They have his jersey. He loves it here. He genuinely wants to be here. Why would he go somewhere else as QB2 when he can stay here as QB2? And I've heard, I think Ron said it, but I've also just heard from other people that Washington absolutely wants to bring him back, and they are, trying to work out a deal to get him to come back as the backup. And I think he knows that. I think him talking about it at the Super Bowl kind of confirmed everything that I've heard leading up to that he has no problem coming back as the backup. So totally fine with it. I hope we do bring back Taylor Heinicke to back up Sam Howell. I think that'd be great. I think they have a good connection. I think, Heinicke's plugged into that locker room. What he did spoke just imaginable things for me when he said, look, Ron, Sam Howell needs to play against the Cowboys in this last game. He deserves this. And I was blown away when I saw that. I gained so much respect for him. I already did have respect for him. Love or hate his play. Just doing something like that, it takes a lot of guts. So shout out to Heinicke. Now, one of the biggest needs this offseason that we can all agree on, and that is the offensive line. There's a lot to break down here. You have 4 guys headed to free agency. And the big one for me is, of course, Wes Schweitzer, because when he's healthy, he's really good. Whether it's at the guard spot or if he has to fill in at center because of all the injuries, Wes Schweitzer, when he is healthy, he is really good. Now, he missed 6 games in 2021 and missed 10 games to end the season. Now, I want to say it's the last 10 games of this season. So for me, it's just when he's healthy, he's really good. But can you depend on a guy like that who's missed, 16 games in the last 2 seasons? Excuse my extra little 2 on 2022 too. But anyways, Trey Turner, that other guard there, awful. You can replace him easily. No problem with that. Tyler Larson, I think he's a great backup center. I think we need to bring him back as a depth piece. I still think we need help at the center spot, and I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about free agents. I'm going to talk about draft guys that I love on this offensive line that could come in and make a huge difference. And then, of course, Nick Martin is a guy who would bring in because of all the injuries to Tyler Larson and Chase Roulier and so on. But once again, Spotrac projects Schweitzer at $13.8 million per year, and I don't see that being the case. I don't think that's reasonable. I don't know if any team out there would pay a guy with those injuries that much. If he's healthy, I'm probably leaning towards, I want to say $8 million a year, maybe $9 million a year range for him because he can play a guard and center. And like I said, he was really good when he was healthy on the line the last 2 seasons. He was one of the only guards that were good these past 2 seasons. So I would like to bring him back, but I'm really curious at what the market looks like for him, what, his actual demands would be. There's no way it's 13, 14 mil a year. He just can't with those injuries. I mean, there's no way Washington would pay that. But at the same time, can you imagine losing out on 4 guys just in free agency? That would suck. I think Larson's a must come back. I'm done with Trey Turner, Nick Martin's, whatever. Schweitzer, it would kind of hurt to lose, but once again, the availability. Same with Chase Roulier. He's a cut candidate for me. Post June 1st, I think, that the salary cap hit just not worth it. But looking at those guys, I say bring back Larson, Schweitzer on the right deal, but if not, we're going to sign another free agent. We're definitely drafting him for this offensive line. We might have 3 draft picks just on the offensive line this season. No problem with it. I'm going to talk to multiple guards, multiple tackles at the Senior Bowl, Shrine Bowl, just on social media, seeing like who all we've communicated with and had meetings with at these events. And there's a lot of guards that said the Washington Commanders have showed a lot of interest in me. So that's what I love to hear. And another need, some people say it's not a need, but for me, it absolutely is a need. And the league might be devaluing this position a little bit, as we move forward. But I think linebackers are still just as important. And when you have 5 on the list, that's not ideal at all. Cole Holcomb, David Mayo, Khaleke Hudson, Milo Eifert, and Jon Bostic. Jon Bostic came in, actually played pretty daggone well for a guy his age that just, we signed due to injuries. Khaleke Hudson had a really good last game against the Cowboys. David Mayo had some flashes, surprisingly, in the last few games of the season. But then Cole Holcomb, obviously another guy that the fans love, has good moments, but then he has some really bad moments as a starting caliber guy. Missed the last 10 games in 2022 due to a foot injury. So you don't know what that's going to look like coming back. For me, he was a liability in the run game at certain times, but then also in the passing games when it really showed. So can Washington get a legit, genuine linebacker 2 next to Jamin Davis? And we don't run a lot of 3 linebacker sets. And usually when we do have that big safety that's coming up. So it's a big dime package. You don't really see many 3 linebacker sets in the NFL at all. So that other guy has to be a rangy guy who can stop the run, who can contain the edge, who can blitz, but also needs to be able to cover some of these, fast wide receivers across the middle, athletic tight ends. So that's what really bothers me of people saying like, oh, linebacker spot's not as important. But at the same time, there's so much that you're asking them to do. And if a play is a bust, it's usually due to one of these linebackers in the middle of the field. Then you're like, what the heck? So for me, linebacker is a huge need. I mean, if you look at the list, there's just too many names on there. Can you bring back Cole Holcomb? I would think so. But regardless, I think you can upgrade over Cole. Once again, I don't know what his market is like out there as a starter, who all would want him to come in as a starter. Maybe a team would take a swing on him. Khaleke Hudson, big-time special teams guy. I'd bring him back as depth. Bring back David Mayo just because he knows the defense. But then, like I said, Cole Holcomb, if you can get him on a good deal, cool. If not, for me, regardless, we need an upgrade. So he would be a backup. So maybe you pay him backup money if no one out there wants him to come in as a starter. And outside of that, there's some skill position guys in offense that are free agents. And this is where I really start to look at it as how much are you paying depth guys like Cam Sims, Jaret Patterson, Jonathan Williams? And it's funny because these three guys have had some big time flashes too. I mean, you think about the Cam Sims catch against the Steelers. You think about the one over Diggs in the Cowboys game. Cam Sims has had some really good moments, but at the same time, how much are you going to pay a wide receiver, 5 essentially behind Terry, Jahan, Curtis, and Dyami Brown? How much are you willing to really throw at it? Or are you just going to draft a guy super late, a late round, or are you going to sign an undrafted free agent to replace them, someone young to come in with this loaded wide receiver room we have? I just don't think they really pay that much for Cam Sims unless he's willing to come out. But maybe he wants to go somewhere where he can move up the depth chart a little bit and get some better opportunities. No problem with that. Same with Jaret Patterson and Jonathan Williams. They both, once again, when they're in the game, they make the most of their opportunities. Jaret Patterson, local kid, he obviously, I think, wants to stay here. This is, pretty much his dream to play here. So I would bring back Jaret Patterson. We know what he is, as that depth guy. Don't know that J.D. McKissic's going to come back because of his injuries. That neck injury was terrible. Surprised he did come back last year. Turned down the Bills, for us, which was surprising. But for me, it's just we know what we have with Jaret Patterson, and he makes the most of his opportunities. He's not going to be crazy expensive. Bring him back. But if he wants to stay, I think he would want to stay. And Jonathan Williams, he can go. And then once again, you can sign somebody else whenever to be that fourth running back if you absolutely need it. Now I'm going to round it out with two guys who kind of under the radar. One's not. Everyone knows who he is. And then another one is pretty much under the radar. But there's just two players to really keep an eye on. These are some interesting storylines here. Obviously, the first one, another fan favorite, Jeremy Reaves. Will the fan favorite have a hot market after making his first Pro Bowl as the best special teams player? He was absolutely the best special teams player. I mean, if you watch some of these games, every time him and Tressway are linking up for a celebration, it's because Jeremy Reaves is either making a big-time one-on-one tackle or he's pinning it within the 5 for him, maybe 10-yard line for Tressway. But just a remarkable guy. Love his story, love his heart, love how he plays. He loves his team. He loves his fan base. There's no way Jeremy Reaves goes somewhere else. But you have to think, he is a safety. Is there some team out there that wants to give him a legit shot at a safety role, in addition to that special teams role? Maybe, catapult him in his career. And I would have no problem with that. It would absolutely suck to lose a guy like Jeremy Reaves. We have to look at this safety room that we have and, how loaded it is and how deep it is. Maybe a team out there wants to give him a shot and is willing to pay him the money to, have an increased role as a safety, but then also get that big time special teams player over to their team. So I hope we don't lose Jeremy Reaves. Bring him back. Would absolutely love to have Reaves back. I mean, that video with him finding out he made the Pro Bowl is one of my favorite videos that I can remember. Just great dude, big time player. Love how he plays. And to round it out is a guy that's under the radar, but had a sneaky good season last year. And that is our UK guy, Efe Obada. Yes, he's a depth edge rusher, but in 390 snaps in 2022, but he made the most out of his opportunities when he did come in. Of course, that Chase Young was banged up. Of course, they're rotating guys with Hill, who has some injuries as well. Shaka Toney, Bradley King. There's a lot of guys on those edge rushers. But for me, this is a guy who in 390 snaps had 2 pass deflections, but 4 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, 8 quarterback hits, 24 total tackles, and 14 of those were solo. And I just remember a couple of games this season where I'm watching and there's guys in the backfield. I'm like, all right, it's probably Montez Sweat or someone. And lo and behold, Efe Obada is back there causing havoc. So a guy that can make the most out of his opportunities kind of reminded me of like what Tim Settle was in the middle before he went to Buffalo, being able to get in the middle. When you get that opportunity on the outside, though, like Efe Obada was wreaking havoc. I was like, Tim Settle in the middle did that same thing. We really wanted him to come back, but of course he left. But I think a guy that can come in, he's not going to cost a lot. You have that experience. You have a guy. We still don't know what we have with Chase Young yet, but you also have, that depth. Maybe not everyone's going to be making the team next year, but for me, he's one of the depth guys that I'm keeping because he does make the most out of those opportunities. Having the 4 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, and 8 quarterback hits. There's starters in the league that didn't put up those kind of numbers this year, which is pretty sad. But for me, I'm keeping an eye on these guys for free agency. Of course, let me know what y'all think, who you're keeping, who you're letting go. This doesn't even cover the cap casualty cuts like I was talking about with Chase Roullier. Logan Thomas is on my list. There's a good bit of guys, but as we get closer to free agency, I'm going to talk about some free agents that I'm watching and looking at for Washington to bring in. I've said this a couple times. I don't think Washington makes a big splash, but I still think you always bring in some guys that can help you out. And, I don't see a William Jackson, the third kind of deal, but maybe a linebacker. Definitely looking at the offensive line. There's some big time names to watch in free agency. So stay tuned. I'm going to break all that down. Of course, we have the draft coming up and the combine. It's the off season, but it's not the off season. There's always something going on until like minicamp and stuff starts. So appreciate y'all checking out this video. Subscribe, like, and I'll see y'all next time on Taking Command with Josh Taylor. Peace.